Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we are very happy to be joined by Charlie Cavell and Murryum Farooqi, two of the organizers from Fund My Future. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, great to be here.
So just so our listeners can sort of get an idea of what your effort is all about, can you explain what the Invest in My Kids proposal is, and if it were passed, what it would do for Michiganders?
Totally. I'll take that one, Murryum. So Invest in My Kids, it gets a little complicated, but the big thing is, one, the problem, our schools have been underfunded for decades in Michigan. We are 44th in the country in school quality.
Yeesh.
To solve that, we want to raise taxes on households that make $1 million a year or more by 5%, and then put all that extra money, this is the complicated part, put all that extra money into K12 Public Education.
Sounds like a righteous proposal. Sounds like a righteous proposal.
Thank you. Yeah, we think so too.
It's a 5% charge, right? Like that's what's in the language right now. Do you know, or are there any like estimates of how much that would generate for schools in Michigan?
I think it's over $1 billion, technically like 1.7 billion with a B.
Yeah.
Nice. And then do you guys know how that would end up being distributed, like throughout schools, or are we getting there? We need to get the money first and then we'll figure it out?
We have language in the proposal that would put it towards teacher recruitment and retention, towards classroom needs, and related to classroom needs includes after-school programming, most things related to schools. So,
Yeah,
it
something
would
like
be
how
like a over 10% increase in the school aid fund for statewide school funding instantly.
it's
Which
something like how
includes
a lot of
universities.
that's good too. Like a lot of teachers will have to pay out of pocket for school supplies,
Oh, yeah.
pencils, and whatnot. I assume it would help with things like that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, teachers spend, I think, on average, something like $2,200 to $2,500 a year out of pocket. And teacher salaries, if you're making 50, 60K, it's a huge chunk of your paycheck because that's what you take home. And then you
Yeah.
pay that in addition. So hopefully it gets rid of that.
Yeah, they're already not making much. I know a lot of new teachers start out at around like 35.
Oh,
Mhm.
totally.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's just absurd.
Totally.
Moly,
And you have
man.
to have a master's degree? Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just an unlivable wage,
Yeah.
essentially.
How do you think we got to the point where we're ranked 44th in a state that, like, I mean, California, lots and lots of money, but Michigan's not a broke state. You know what I mean? Like, we're doing pretty well for ourselves. How did we get to this point where we just aren't funding schools?
I think I was just going to say, I think like Mississippi even does better than us.
Yeah,
my
that's
God.
true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
if you're
unacceptable.
44th, like
Yeah.
there's not many left.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
But how did we get here? I think they've been like defunding over the past 10 years.
Yeah, I think it's two things. So it's one, things cost money.
Yeah.
And then over time, things cost more money. So what we've done is two things. One, we have stopped adding money, aka like revenue or taxes, to fund the things that we want, like schools. And then on top of that, we've cut a lot in the form of taxes and raided the school aid fund to fill budget gaps to then help, at least in Michigan. We've raided the school aid fund multiple times. Democrats and Republicans have both voted for over decades to take this big pot of money that's for schools and strip away millions of dollars at a time to then give it to businesses in the form of corporate subsidies or plug budget gaps to make sure that this department or that department doesn't have to lay off as many people in an economic downturn. So we've just been cutting and cutting and cutting instead of raising revenue from the people that can and should be paying for it. So that's what the ballot initiative is going to fix.
How do you think they've been able to get away with this? Like Democrats and Republicans,
Yeah.
Democrats especially. How have they been
Democrats
able to get away
especially.
with just raiding the school aid fund to pay for corporate interests?
I think it's a lack of imagination. I don't know what Murryum has to say, but I think basically it's a lack of imagination, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan saying government's the problem and talking about welfare queens and all this stuff.
Yeah.
That then leads to me being a 34-year-old living in a state where we have to pay to play, to participate in sports. It costs like $400 to be on like the football team at your local high school. I think there's like a very direct through line between the way people talk about how government can and should give you things like good schools, and then if they convince you government can't help you get good schools, the end result is us having schools that are 44th in the country.
And also, there's like the cycle of like, you defund the government, so then the government services don't work very well. So then everyone's like, why would he put money towards this crap?
Yeah.
And then it just continues. So I think we're dealing with the results of that. And so that's why like Fund My Future wise also we care about culture shift. Why, you know, Charlie is wearing his hat that says I heart taxes.
I was
say,
gonna bring that
right?
up for sure. Yeah.
So because we're, you know, not even just about just this ballot initiative, but about changing like the mindset people have about taxes and about funding government, and saying that, you know, we shouldn't just, you know, throw our hands up and be like, oh, you know, the government can't be trusted.
I feel like for a lot of people, the idea that your tax money can fund programs that genuinely benefit you is just a foreign concept. I mean, we just saw it with the New York City mayoral race. Zoran is promoting these policies that just objectively good things, at least in my opinion, funding the buses, funding the subway system and whatnot. And people just have this inability to conceptualize tax dollars being used for something that could actually make their life better and the city better. And I think it's the same kind of thing with education, right? Like, why would I pay more money when the government sucks at every turn? Do you feel like that is a sentiment that you're already running into, even though this effort's sort of early on?
A little bit with schools, but I think back to the Zoran thing, what feels important about that is, at least in my experience, because I did some phone banks on my time off for Zoran, but also
I've
nice.
something to say about this.
Yeah.
Well,
But
if people
also-
don't know you did the activism, then it
Yeah,
already
there you go.
happened.
There you go. Yeah,
100%.
But also, just, you know, having been in Michigan and having been around Michigan politics for a long time, I think the big thing that I see is all people love those ideas, right? People want good quality education and they're willing to pay for better schools. Then what happens is the counter argument comes in that says, you shouldn't think that what you deserve is real. We all deserve better. And the whole con, whether you start with Ronald Reagan or go back to like the Middle Ages, or you talk about Zoran last week, the whole con, if you boil it down, is basically, yes, you deserve better, but that's socialism. That's changing the power. That's making it so that I, as your rich overlord, or the person that has influence and money to be able to influence political elections or donate to campaigns, I then have less power and I create jobs. And you don't want me to have to be scared about creating jobs, do you? And that's the cudgel they use for everything. And if you boil it down, it's everyone agrees that they deserve better, but are you willing to look to your right and look to your left and say, yeah, now's the time we should get something that we deserve?
Yeah, literally any time like a person pushing for either, you know, something that involves higher taxation to fund public services, it's always like there's going to be a mass exodus of businesses. And it's, when we're looking at something like, not true in general, right?
We have
But
examples. There's Oregon.
There you go.
And I forgot the other state, Massachusetts. No, Oregon and Massachusetts. They both raised taxes on the wealthy, and they didn't leave. They stay. And like the studies, the data shows that wealthier people are not very like mobile.
Yeah,
it's actually usually
makes
poorer
sense.
people that are having to move because of a job or school or work or something, right?
Yeah.
So wealthy people are like, you know, in their community, like most people don't want to move.
Right.
So naturally, wealthy people who can afford not to move don't.
Moving an entire business would take a lot of effort too.
That's a good point. The businesses with the jobs. And so, like, we have local examples too, like Bloomfield Hills has higher taxes, and that's why they have better schools, because they have more money, and all the rich people didn't leave, right?
Yeah, and there's all kinds of downstream effects that make the operating environment better for businesses with higher taxation. Of course, that gets a little complicated when you're just trying to sell one thing to a voter, but especially when we're talking about a place like New York City, like, I think the businesses are going to leave New York City.
You think wealthy people are going to leave New York City and all the amenities that New York City offers? They would not leave their favorite steakhouse.
Goodbye.
Yeah, it's like there's a place called Wall Street. Like they're not leaving New York City. But I guess before we get into the broader questions about just like taxation and how you sort of want to like change the rhetoric around it, where are you at currently with getting this petition on the ballot next year?
Yeah, so just on Friday last week.
Today's Wednesday.
Today's Tuesday.
Wait, was that
Keep it
Friday?
in, keep it in, keep it
Man,
in.
what a wild week. Okay, yeah, Friday. Last week on Friday, we went up to Lansing and hung around for 9 hours in this government office building, and then through a bunch of twists and turns, we got a 3-1 yes vote to be able to be on the ballot. So the Board of Canvassers has approved our language. So we
100-word summary.
100-word
Nice.
summary.
100-word summary.
So that that describes the like 4-page official like constitutional amendment that we'll go collect signatures for starting July 15th-ish, July 20th-ish.
Oh, very soon then, yeah.
And then we need to collect signatures for 180 days. The signature number is 422,000 certified.
Ooh.
Our goal is like 600,000 to 700,000
Of course.
total signatures to make sure we have a margin. And then once those get verified, we got to win the campaign to have enough people in Michigan vote yes on Prop, whatever it
Like
would be.
2-point-something million.
Yeah. In
Wow.
November 2026.
And what goes behind like launching an effort like that? Trying to get 600, 700,000 people to go
Forget
sign
that
things.
part. It's also a ginormous coalition
Yeah.
of,
Of course.
a lot
That's
of
true.
different
Yeah.
groups.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah,
A lot
So-
of communication.
a lot of communication.
Both internally and externally, hence why we're on your podcast.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of like good vibes, to be
True.
honest.
We're heavy on that.
Yo, it's cool. Like
Yeah.
we're having all these intense meetings because we have to figure out how do we make a calendar of events where on a random Saturday in like August, there's probably going to be like 200 back to school events across the state
Yeah.
that we're going to need to have some of our 5,000 volunteers at.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you do that? Is
Get
that just a
them-
Google spreadsheet? Yeah, like this. And it's intense because we're like, whoa, we got to figure that out. But everyone's leaving these meetings being like, great, we're doing it. This is fun for the
Yeah.
kids. We're making things better.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like intense but positive, which is cool because, again, having worked in other realms in like campaigning stuff, they're usually not positive. So this is fun. It's at
Really?
least
Oh,
just a
really?
fun vibe to hang out with.
That's nice to know. And it's also like you say, yeah, it's kids.
Yeah.
It's kids having better
Yeah.
school. That should
Yeah.
be uncontroversial. And just I feel like the broader proposal itself should be uncontroversial as well. You say it's what, 5% additional tax on households making over 1 million?
Mhm.
What they need that for?
Well,
Right.
that's true.
Extra.
That's
Well,
how I
and
feel.
That's to what you were saying before
What about the
about.
bagel?
What's
Oh
the-
man.
what's the
Okay.
bagel
Wait.
thing?
Is
wait,
it a
wait.
donut?
The-
Sorry.
The bagel cheese and
We,
eggs?
we
The
can, we
bagel
can
or the
do-
donut,
We
right?
can get into
But-
the abstract ideas.
Yeah. But to what you said before about the whole like Zoran and rich people leaving and stuff is like, what's the New York City proposal? 1% tax on.
I think it's
Mhm.
2%.
I think it's 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that's like our thing of 5%. If you just do the math. So one, there's the math, and then two, I want to just give again the culture shift that Murryum talked about.
Mhm.
So one is the math. The math is if you make $1.2 million a year, you will pay an extra $10,000 in taxes.
That's
so
it?
that's 5% on that 200K. So that's it. And that 10,000 extra dollars would go towards the schools.
Oh, it's
So-
just money over 1 million.
Yes.
It's not
a
even
separate
like
Yeah.
bucket.
So if you
I
make,
was thinking it was
Yeah.
like 50,000 is still what they need that for.
If you make 1 million and
Every
$1
dollar
in a year, and it's also income. So it's not your retirement account, it's not your art collection,
W2
it's not your second house,
income.
W2 income. So if you make $1 million and $1, your $1 million will be taxed at the normal state income tax, normal federal, whatever. And then that $1 will have an extra 5 cents taken out of it, and that 5 cents will go to the school aid fund, and that adds up to what Murryum said, which is over $1 billion. And then the school aid fund right now in Michigan to fund most of the schooling for most of the schooling for every K12 education, like center school district in Michigan is $20 billion.
Mm.
And so that 5 cents from that $1, that $101th, that 5 cents goes to the school aid fund. That 5 cents adds up amongst all 52,000 millionaires in Michigan that would likely have to pay this tax.
Only 52,000 people.
Yeah.
That's
For the
crazy.
record.
Out of 10
And then-
million.
Yeah, out of 10 million. And then so that 5 cents out of one of those 52,000 folks adds up to $1.5 billion or whatever Murryum said, 1.7. And then that 1.7 billion gets added to the $20 billion school aid fund. And then just like that, you have a dozen % more money for schools and kids.
Just like that, like
Yeah.
you have better outcomes in the future
and,
as well.
Yeah, and again, and so that's the policy side or the math side. Then the culture shift that again Murryum was talking about is like, okay, if you make 1.2 mil, how much is it gonna hurt to lose 10K out of that for schools?
Yeah.
And then the second thing is again talking about this whole narrative we have of government being the problem. And like Murryum said,
Mm-hmm.
you say government's the problem, then you cut government, then people see that government becomes a problem because like call center times are long or there's a waiting list for vouchers or schools start to suck. And so they say, why should I believe in the government? that whole thing, what we believe at Fund My Future and part of the Invest in My Kids effort is what we believe is that taxes are how we show we care about one another in our modern and complicated society. Like
Yeah.
right back when we were cave people, you could just have anyone be a dentist. That's not how things work anymore. Back when we were cave people, you didn't need roads and highways and internet.
There's
But
no
it's-
social contract.
Yeah, yeah, there's nothing like that anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So because our world is more complicated and more intertwined and interdependent, taxes are how we show we care about one another. So if you don't like taxes, the way we think of it is you're not really into helping your neighbor, because also you will need help from your neighbor at some point.
And we're seeing the sort of antithesis of what you're saying, and like just this process of government sucks, they make government worse, then
Yeah.
people get more mad at government. We're seeing this process like play out nationally
Yeah.
with these just, I think like, what was the recent number? $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts.
Yeah.
They're cutting SNAP, they're cutting programs to veterans, they're cutting all these different things. I wonder the extent to which states are going to be able to prepare for this, but it certainly seems like this proposal would at least do something to help one area of the state of Michigan when it comes to these just like, I think people are really underestimating the sheer size of what's about to happen to states like Michigan. And it's good to see that at least maybe we can do something on the ballot next year. Aside from the strict policy, what do you think, and maybe you've already seen a little bit of this, but what do you think the major arguments against your ballot proposal is going to be?
Seems like you guys are fighting an uphill battle.
Because I can already see in my head, like, they want to trans the kids or something like that. Like, they want to fund transgender surgeries happening in schools or something like that's going to happen. I just wonder what you think from your standpoint.
I mean, maybe this is not, I don't know if this is what you were thinking, but the thing I get a lot, it's kind of sad. It's just people being like, what's the point? A lot of the times they're just like, can't the government just undo it? Like, it's very, I guess, which is how a lot of people feel now. Just like, things are bad, we can't trust the government. It's all back to the government, not trusting the government, and we have to tell them like, hey, but the cool part is we live in a democracy where we put the money to the government and then we vote for who decide. You know, people forget that we put those people there, and like those meetings are public and you can talk at them, and like theoretically, politicians can be held accountable or you can vote them out. So we're trying to pitch it as like, this is a part of our democratic system.
Have you been running into a lot of people saying that like, oh, this can just be undone?
Oh yeah,
that's
And it's
genuinely
from
Undone
Insane.
by who,
Like-
though? Like, undone by who? I think, like, ballot
right.
proposals...
It's by who you put in office.
Right, but like ballot proposals are like the most direct form of democracy that we have available to us, right? And if elected officials aren't going to do it because they like doing the corporate subsidies, then the only way we can make a difference is if we get a proposal and vote for it.
But it's also like the government can just like undo anything. It's
Right.
about it, like you say, it's
Yeah.
about the
Why-
people that you put in office. It's about being a diligent citizen, you know?
Yeah,
like,
why doesn't
doing
the
your civic
government
duty.
just do universal health care? Because they don't want to.
Exactly. Why doesn't the
This
government help
is-
you out? They don't want to.
This is kind of what Murryum's saying, right? Which is that it might sound funny at first, but you were talking about the Medicaid cuts and all this federal
Yeah.
stuff and all this. This all ties into the basic fact that taxes equal democracy, right? And democracy equals taxes. So that if you want your taxes to go towards cutting Medicaid so that then billionaires can get more money in their pocket and they have
Yeah.
to have less of a responsibility to their community, aka paying taxes, then that's who you vote for. If you want your taxes to go to making sure that the 1.5 million children in Michigan that go to K12 schools get a good education, and that 52,000 families that make over $1 million a year have to pay 5% more on $1 million in income above, then that's what you vote for. So when we talk about all this political stuff, I want to just make sure it's emphasized that your budget is your value statement.
Yeah.
In any entity, whether it's a business, a nonprofit, your household budget, or a government. But the thing is, what holds you accountable to your values should be the people when it's a government budget. But I think we've lost that somewhere along the way. And that's also part of why not just Invest in My Kids, but Invest in My Kids is trying to bring that accountability back through building trust with people.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, there's another ballot initiative because we're part of this big coalition
Right.
called Michigan for the Many.
Yeah.
Which is trying to do not just more funding for our schools and our children's futures by raising taxes on rich people, but also getting money out of politics so that we can trust in our government
Yeah.
again. So not only do we need to invest in our future using rich people's taxes, because that's the lightest lift, to be honest, right? If we can't figure out how to convince 2.5 million Michigan voters in November 2026 and 600,000 people the next 180 days to sign this ballot petition to raise taxes by 5% on 50,000 rich families, then, like, this is like the Hail Mary for democracy type thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, if we can't convince Michigan people to sign up for rich people paying their fair share, so 1 million children a year, right? Because this is a permanent thing. So 1.5 million children a year in Michigan get more money for their education and future.
Yeah, if we can't do this, what can we do?
Yeah, then it's all over. Like, the
Right.
party's over. This is us just figuring out who's going to turn the lights out last. Like, you know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Right.
But that's our Invest in My Kids initiative. But then there's also Money Out of Politics, which is going to be going to the Board of Canvassers in the next month or two, which will be making sure that entities that have a contract with the state government of $250K or more cannot donate to politicians because it's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So again, if we can't get that ballot initiative done, and if we can't get rich people pay more for our schools because they got it like that, then,
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically about the money DTE spends on
Exactly.
Lansing.
Yeah.
Good Lord, man.
Yeah.
Millions and millions of dollars.
Millions.
It's also like these are common sense reforms. It's
Yeah.
like if you're spending money on if you have government contracts, you shouldn't be able to like influence whether or not you keep getting those government
Yeah.
contracts unless you do a good job. And you should be able to tax people to pay for schools
Mhm.
because how else?
Mhm.
And investments in education are often the best investments that a society can
Yeah.
make for its future and I don't
Mhm.
know, continuing to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I was
mm.
gonna say culture can kind of override common sense.
Of
Amen.
course, yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, and I think that's really all it is, because I think if you went to a person and said, hey, we should redistribute 5% of the resources after $1 million to schools so that people can, kids can go to school and have a good experience there, I think like you'd get broad agreement, but there's a sort of perversion that happens or an ideological shift that happens when they start coupling things into it from like, culture war issues like they're going to trans the kids or this is going to be used to indoctrinate students into hating America or something like
And it's
that.
just like so they can have books
Yeah.
Yeah.
because sometimes the teachers have to buy the books or the
Yeah.
supplies, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's really sad, especially considering how many people like come to this country for
Mhm.
the education.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like this is supposed to be our thing.
Our taxes aren't being raised.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
And
yeah,
I'm
I'm
not,
good.
not-
I'm not
I'm-
making
I'm
that
good. I'm
much.
chilling.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not like I like that framing, but I recognize
Yeah.
that's where a lot of people are.
Yeah.
Our taxes aren't being raised. There's
Yeah.
probably not a single person listening to this podcast whose taxes are going to get
Yeah.
raised. And that's
If
just
you
the
are,
reality
maybe
of it all.
invest a little bit into
Yeah,
this operation.
But
Feel happy about
Of course, but speaking of the culture shift you're talking about, everybody thinks they're like a temporarily embarrassed millionaire. Everybody thinks they're going to get there one day. And because, I don't know, 20, maybe 30 years down the line, they or their kids could maybe in a long shot make a lot of money that they're going to say that kid can't have $10,000 less money.
To what you just said, to prepare for this podcast, I looked up a stat.
Okay.
And the average household income in Michigan is 14 times smaller than $1 million a year in income. So household. So like
Yeah.
you got a family with kids. Your income's like $72,000 a year.
Yeah.
You times that by 14, that's $1 million a year in income. I think that math's right.
And like if they're making
So-
it work, you can make it work too.
Well, that's the thing is like the thing about this whole like rags to riches
Right.
or I got to get on my grind or whatever. Okay, go ahead, go for that. But like, don't punish the next generation for you thinking that one day you will have 14 times more income, because maybe you'll get there, maybe you won't. But like, this is the whole thing about our culture shift is we all finish school.
Mhm.
So it's on us to keep the good thing going or make it better. And part of the whole thinking of us as a community or us caring about our neighbor or one another is like, I'm not going back to school. I graduated high school in 2008. So
Yeah.
I don't have kids. I'm going to get a vasectomy. Like, why should I pay for kids' schooling? It's because I care about my community.
Yeah.
It's because it's the nice thing to do. It's because there's like the moral right, not just the economic right.
And even if you can't convince people on like the bleeding heart aspect of
Yeah.
it, it's pretty easy to see that the smarter people are, the better workers they become,
Yeah.
and the more rich the state
Yeah.
gets.
Well,
Like
like
if
that
you're
becomes
if
your
you're
problem.
purely
Yeah.
personally motivated
Yeah.
for wealth, then you want smart people around you
Yeah.
in your state.
Well,
Yeah,
it's like
right.
the CFPB, like every dollar invested in
Yeah.
the CFPB returns like 20 back to the government or 20
Rest
back
in
to
peace.
consumers.
Yeah.
But yeah, RIP the CFPB.
Yeah.
It's just like that for schools. Every dollar you invest in schools
Totally.
is more kids getting more educated.
Totally.
It's people doing better in society.
Well, and I guess another way to say it is like, do you want your kids to be freaking stupid?
Yeah, there you go. Maybe that's the
We
message.
should
There
really
you
change
go.
the
There you
campaign of
go.
that.
Yeah.
What's the initial? What's the acronym? DY.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have put that in the 100-word summary. Do
That's
you want
right,
your kids to be
exactly.
stupid?
Like 20
Yeah.
spare words.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's true. When we go back to finalize stuff, we'll
Put that in the
ask
state
them.
constitution.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's the type of politics we need right now.
Is your organization also part of the I think there's a ranked choice voting petition floating around?
Yeah.
Is that
yeah.
a part of your group as well? Or
Yeah,
you're working on
they're-
that as well?
They're one of the things that is like, so this Michigan for the many, just to give like the straight up pitch, is the whole premise is if you think the economy is rigged, you're right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If things don't feel like they're getting better, you're right. So we're trying to show, to be honest, the country, by starting here in Michigan, that making a Michigan for the many looks like having rich people pay their fair share in taxes and having that money go to our schools so we can have brighter futures for our kids, getting money out of politics because that's just unethical to have people
Yeah.
with such a conflict of interest so blatantly, because it also bastardizes our democracy. And then, yes, there's also the Rank My Choice ballot initiative that, at least in Oakland County, we're working with them. And that's really cool because, again, So Ron shows that that's one of the cool things that works. Rank My Vote is, I think, something that's done in a couple states. And again, the whole point of Michigan for the Many as this like broad-based coalition of all these different ballot initiatives is we all can and should come together to be focusing on the fact that we deserve better. And
Yeah.
we're not going to let someone talking about trans problems or immigrants being an issue or rich people being our benevolent overlords who give us jobs out of the kindness of our hearts. We're not going to let that narrative split us, because whether you live in a trailer park or a mansion, we all deserve better. And until all of us get better, all of us are suffering from that, including rich people, including millionaires. So now's
Yeah.
the time to cut that shit out.
Yeah, ranked choice voting I'd be very happy about that because then I could vote for a third party candidate without feeling bad about it.
You know what I'm
You
saying?
know
Then I
what
could
mean?
not
There you
have
go.
to advocate for certain people
There you go.
just to
There
stay
you go.
keep my head above water.
And,
Yeah.
and if I could say also,
Yeah.
that in addition to what you just lifted up is like you are believing in the power of us together,
Mhm.
right? So this is, again, this reiterate, like this is like the Hail Mary to save democracy. If you believe that government can do stuff right, like fund our schools with taxes on rich people, if you believe that money out of politics is something that does happen and you see that change for the better and you believe that you can trust the people in Lansing more, then you're more willing to give them the grace and kindness they need as they do their yucky politics to figure out how to put more money into roads, internet, healthcare, any
Yeah.
number of things.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Go
Yeah.
for
Well,
it.
at the very least, I could do third party and then whoever's next best.
Yeah.
It,
And
it
then-
makes putting
yeah.
good people in office viable
Exactly.
instead of
It
having
would
to
feel
advocate
better at
for
least.
certain
Right.
people.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
care about vibes, and I want to
And-
feel a
yeah.
good vibe.
I want a good
Yeah.
vibe candidate.
Yeah.
And I feel like it, like with the New York one, it was like they're working together, like they're crossing
Yes,
voices
yeah.
and stuff,
Mhm.
and so it's takes care like less vitriol.
We can finally start ratcheting left instead of continuing to ratchet right
There
with
you go.
liberals going
Right.
with socialists
Yeah.
instead of
Right.
liberals going with conservatives
Right.
and saying, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we do need to
Yeah.
kick all the
Right.
immigrants out.
Back to
Yeah.
the nitty gritty a little bit. I don't know how much you're able to talk about this kind of thing, but you mentioned you did like the whole Board of Canvassers thing recently, get your language finalized. Can you talk a little bit about that process? And I heard there were some sort of like outside
Yeah.
actors trying to make their way into what we were doing here in Michigan.
The Heritage Foundation was there. They spent like from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Rank My Vote, so we didn't have a whole lot of time. We had like 2 hours maybe.
Okay.
So not many people got to speak for ours other than like the main lawyers on both sides. So I guess for better or worse. But yeah, there was drama at the end of ours because everyone else's, even though they like go back and forth of I'm confused and what, huh?
Yeah.
For like 4 hours, at the end everyone votes yes unanimously. Even although I will
Nice.
say it was cool to see because they like type up the new versions and then print it out. And it was like a live like editing thing, like, okay, this is the version we're gonna use.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. It felt like government in work kind of thing in
Yeah.
action. But yeah, hours after discussing it, then there like 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And the 2 Democrats voted yes, 1 Republican voted no,
Classic.
which meant the other one got scared, I think, and like was like, I'm gonna be no one's gonna like me. I'm gonna deadlock this. I'm gonna vote no. And so we're all sitting there at 4:30, which they told us the building closed at 4 p.m.
Oh, of course.
Sitting there like, he just, after all of this, like,
With the Heritage Foundation guy staring at you.
Yeah.
The Heritage Foundation guy
Yeah.
that shouldn't even be there.
I think
Literally.
it's so funny that the Heritage Foundation is literally everywhere.
flying
Funny in
people
an
in from
insidious
North
way,
Carolina.
but
North
They
Carolina.
love talking
Yeah.
about all these bloated government jobs where people get these bureaucratic jobs and don't do anything, and then they send
Yeah.
the Heritage Foundation guy to just stand.
or even just like the
Just
deep
stand.
state stuff, like oh, the
Yeah.
deep state's been infiltrated by leftists and communists or whatever. It's like no, it's the Heritage Foundation guys.
They
They're
got you guys-
literally everywhere.
They got these guys flying around across the country making, I don't know, $700,000 a year just to be annoying and
Mhm.
evil.
They stayed the whole time.
Wow.
So, like, we didn't want to be there.
Love the
Right.
game.
Well,
Love the
and
game.
this is the thing. I think this is what power looks like too. This is again to reiterate why Michigan for the many, invest in my kids, and the whole thing we're up against is are 52,000 millionaires in Michigan plus their friends from the Heritage Foundation, the Koch brothers, wherever the hell, are those handful of people going to convince 10 million other Michigan residents to vote against something they know and agree they deserve, like better schools or money out of politics or a democracy they can believe in and trust, so that these 50,000 rich folks can keep their power? They're going to say any number of things to try and split us up. They're
Yeah.
going to say trans shit. They're going to say immigrant stuff. They're going to say whatever else comes up. They're going to say socialism. They're going to say, job
They're gonna blatantly
creators.
lie.
Yeah,
It's nonstop.
because it's an existential thing for them.
Yeah.
This is not any different than the peasants rising up in the Middle Ages in Europe trying to knock down the king's castle and the king saying, whoa, 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 what happens if I'm not here? What are you guys going to do? Just work together?
Wait a second.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same thing, but just using Twitter and TikTok instead of like bows and arrows.
Yeah.
It's, same
What did
story
we say,
throughout
like,
history.
Once there's different forms of power, like there's like
Mm.
guns, there's violence, or there's this.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Right.
and hopefully we don't have to
Gun
resort to
power.
violence.
Real-
to-
Right. What is it
Academic
they
political
say
violence.
though in political science class they teach you
Hard
there's-
power and soft power.
There you go. Hard power and soft
Ah.
power, which can right, and then there's within that gun power, political power, and people power.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The people with the money got the guns, and they got the politics. So the rest of us got to figure out how to do the people power
But
part.
there's a lot
Which
of
can
people.
work at times according to some things.
Yeah,
So it's
According
not
to
like
Exactly.
some good
there
politicians
are examples
pass.
of it working. Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
Zoran did just
Right,
get a huge
right.
voter turnout and win a Democrat primary as a socialist. Again,
Against
be
the
a socialist, don't
establishment
be
guy,
a,
yeah.
Right.
yeah, be a socialist, don't be a socialist, whatever. But just saying, like, the goal of that campaign was to unseat power as it is, or to at least shift where it comes from, and he's doing it.
Yeah.
Agree with it, disagree with it, but that's what shifting power looks like, and it happened last week.
Of course, and I'm sure Zoran winning felt like a pretty big boost to your own morale too, because
yeah.
it sparked these. Not only does it spark these conversations nationally about left-wing economic populism and how it can win elections, even if it's New York City, big bad evil communist New York City, but also just the fact that maybe we can get this done a little bit easier.
You know what? You say that. So we had our little Oakland County
Yeah.
launch event on Saturday, and the guy who hosted the event, he's like an old hippie who runs the Crowfoot in Pontiac, and so he said, I was talking to him, and I said, what makes you like these sorts of radical populist kind of political movements? Thanks for hosting and doing it for
Yeah.
free. It's really nice of you Saturday morning. This old dude's like moving around chairs for us.
It was
Nice.
like the oldest building in Pontiac or
Yeah.
something.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
The
But-
oldest commercial building.
There you go.
FYI.
But so this
Anyways.
guy, when I was helping him, stack chairs, I was like, what makes you such a into radical things like this? And he says, this isn't radical. This is just.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So
Mm.
just when you say like left wing radical, whatever, I think part of the thing we're going to have to practice on the Michigan for the Many coalition or in Invest in My Kids is it's not radical to talk to people about how their children deserve better.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not radical to get the people with the most to pay a little bit more that they can afford. It's not radical to tell companies like DT and Blue Cross Blue Shield, who spend millions of dollars a year influencing political discourse in the state, to not be able to do that, because that's exactly where they make their money from, is the state. Like, these are not radical positions. It is radical that the Heritage Foundation flew some dude into Lansing, Michigan to sit in the government
Yeah.
office
It was
building all
three
day.
Yeah.
dudes.
Yeah.
Three dudes.
Right.
Three dudes all
Oh,
on
that's
payroll.
right. There's the beefy cake.
Yeah,
There's the
I
beefcake
told
guy.
you.
That was,
I
yeah.
told you
And
about
this
it.
kind of thing happens
But-
like
Then there was one
all
with the
over
bow
the
tie.
They are everywhere.
Yeah.
This is intimidating local
Right.
politics.
Well, and that's the thing. That's what's radical. It's not
Mhm.
radical to talk to a mom walking out of Kroger's and say, hey, I know you're in a rush, and I know groceries are more expensive than you thought they were going to be, but can you sign this ballot petition to help your children have a better future? That should not be radical. And
Yeah.
whoever tells you that is trying to split us up, because 10 million Michiganders is more than 52,000 millionaires who might have a say in why this is a bad idea for them.
Yeah.
And ultimately,
100%.
it's about rejecting right-wing framing.
Yeah,
Right? There's
yeah,
also this
there
big
you
kind
go.
of, we
There
don't
you
want to
go.
be, the Democrats talk about not wanting to be perceived as socialist,
There
not
you
wanting to be
go.
perceived as radical. If you're to the left of Mitch McConnell, they're going to call you a socialist.
Amen.
And
Amen. There you go.
they're going
There
to
you
do
go.
it no
Good
matter
point.
what. You're always
Yeah.
going to be radical if you want to do anything good.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
you might
like,
as well
yeah,
just
if
go
being
and do
good
it.
is radical, okay.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, then.
Maybe that just went against everything you said.
No,
So,
that's
yeah.
cool. Yeah, whatever.
Well, it's about a framing issue. It's about how you take these
Yeah.
issues and you communicate them to people. And ultimately, it shouldn't be maybe insane's a better term than radical. It shouldn't be an insane thing to get out there and say that I want my future kids to be able to go to school
Yeah.
and it be a little bit better. And for
Yeah.
some dude to pay like $10,000 more in taxes, that's crazy. And it's also like just a side note with the big beautiful bill getting passed. All that money just gets salted anyway. They're raising the salt cap from 10,000 to 40,000. They just get to deduct it. I digress.
I mean, if Trump can convince people that a project of mass deportation isn't radical, then I think
Right.
we can convince people that this is not a
Yeah.
radical proposal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe it's too early to tell on this question, but outside of the coalition you've already sort of composed and described, do you anticipate any allies that you can rely on in the state of Michigan? And if you can't name specific politicians, that's fine. But do you think that there's people that are going to be amenable to this sort of thing? Because we saw in 2022, like a lot of Democrats specifically sort of hitched their wagon to the abortion proposal, and there was one other that a lot of them joined onto as well. Do you anticipate that sort of thing happening here?
Yeah, but again, that's not the point, right? No one's going to save us but ourselves. The
Yeah.
goal is not to deflect
Sure.
or whatever, but to truly be like, I'm an Oakland County commissioner as like a part-time job outside of my full-time job here. So like I talked to all these people running for U.S. Senate. I've talked to all these people running for governor. So like I've told them about this just as a person, talking to them as another person. And they all say, sounds cool. I got to do some analysis. And I was like, I wasn't asking for your permission.
some
to-
analysis.
Yeah,
No, I'm
because the
saying.
point isn't,
Wow.
the point isn't we need to find another savior who will make things right for us.
Yeah.
It's we need to recognize we need to save ourselves because we deserve better. And the way that happens is us believing in one another and not being split by the right-wing language talking points about how this group is better than that group. And then just freaking do it so that we can all then say, we put you in office in a place where we can trust things are better because we got money out of politics and we put $1.5 billion more into our schools every year. So now you can go to work on the things that we trust you to do. But we as Michigan residents need to do this. Not Mallory Morrow or
Yeah.
Mike Duggan or Eric Nez. And they're not going to do it for us because they have a different incentive and a different set of goals. Our goal is the people of Michigan getting what they deserve, which is a Michigan for the many.
And it would be nice
Yeah.
to be able to do it without somebody who didn't really help all that much being able to take credit for it.
Yeah, thank you. That's it.
And
Yeah,
you don't,
exactly.
You don't want to be beholden to a politician.
Of course.
also.
Amen.
I guess
Like,
I was.
I got you here.
Yeah.
Listen
Yeah.
to me now.
Yeah.
This money's going somewhere else.
I guess
Yeah.
the question, we're kind of, not to put words in your mouth, is like, do you think that you would be able to get that like institutional boost from people signing out of these
Yeah.
things? Because like we said, we don't think these are controversial.
Yeah, this is the funny thing, right?
Yeah.
One, they all can come to our long ass calendar meetings we're having to figure out where we're going to be for the backpack
We know
giveaways.
about that.
Yeah, they can show up to those if they want.
Yeah.
But like, we're not going to call them out and say thanks for your endorsement, right?
Sure.
If only we had enough Democrats, in honest, that were honestly that are willing to just go out and put their name behind these things without expecting anything else. Just good. If
Because it's
only we
just-
had Democrats that were willing to go do things because they were good.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of that. Like, oh, I think this will be politically toxic. I
Mhm.
support you, but I can't hitch my wagon to this. I can't publicly
Mhm.
support it. So I was just wondering, like, if you think there are figures out there that would be willing to help you sort of raise the profile, not that they're going to be the savior, but just that maybe they can contribute a little to the,
Oh, sure.
the project here.
There are folks that have been supportive, and there are, state representatives and senators and people running for higher office that have been very helpful. But none of them have said, I endorse this and I really want to make sure that this is a key platform in our campaign for XYZ office. I mean, and I don't know the stats for Michigan, but just using the framing for nationally, we had 75 million people vote for Kamala Harris in November 2024. We had 77 million vote for Donald Trump in November 2024. And then we had 89 million people in America that could have voted that didn't vote at all.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing at Michigan for the Many isn't trying to do what a lot of Democrats and Republicans are arguing over, which is how to move more to the middle to try and court those 2 or 3 million swing voters in America. What we're trying to do is make it so that those in Michigan, out of that 89 million that didn't vote, actually can believe in their community and democracy again. Because what they want to see is rich people pay their fair share. If something feels unfair, then you don't want to be a part of it. So if democracy feels like it's rigged, why would you vote?
Yeah.
If your schools are not getting better or feel like they're actively getting worse, why would you vote?
Yeah.
If you've said something and nothing happens. If money in politics is this pernicious thing where DTE keeps messing up and your Blue Cross Blue Shield stuff keeps going higher and it doesn't seem to be getting better, but people say all the right things or they say all the wrong things, why would you vote?
Yeah.
Like, give me something worth investing my time and energy in, and I'll be fully behind democracy. But we have not been doing that with the standard political rhetoric on the right or the left. So we're doing the Michigan for the Many, which is to court those folks in Michigan that say, I'm disenchanted with the system. Show me something worth buying. Like, make me convinced I should buy into democracy.
Do you think the argument will have to change based on like the person that you're talking to? I only ask this because there's been Democrats for like 6 months have been asking like, how do we win back the white dudes? So I wonder if you think, and it's a little different because it's a ballot petition and not a candidate, but do you think the argument has to change, or is it just like, look, these people can afford to pay a little bit more and our kids need it?
What do you think?
I think we say the same thing to everybody.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about that, and it was, why be like inauthentic and have like a weird different message for different subgroups, because it's like a pretty, I don't know, generally acceptable thing of like kids need school to get a job, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think we're tailoring messages or anything. It makes it easier also.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
Not be
easy to have such
slimy.
like a what should be an uncontroversial thing, like just an easy statement to get out there and make. Let's make schools better for kids.
And maybe, or I was gonna say, maybe if someone brings up the concern of like they're feeling like they don't want to participate in democracy or something, or oh, I feel like maybe this resistance stuff is more important. Sometimes people are busy with that kind of protesting, which is important. But
Like the no kings type
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
so maybe that's where we like can offer the perspective of like this is part of that, and this is part of like democracy. So not like a different message for each person, but if someone brings that up, we would say that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you talk about the framing being the framing, because I think when a lot of candidates just for office, or a lot of people when they do politics in general, I firmly believe that you do need to meet people where they're at. But in order to meet people where they're at, I don't think you need to adopt right-wing framing. I don't think you need to go and give credence to arguments that are bad. When you're talking about immigration, I think just for an example, I think you can get out there and just have a positive affirmative message about these things, and you don't need to say, well, yeah, there are some people that do the murders that they're talking about.
Right. There's
don't
no
need to
need to
worry
like
about
go
that.
to like a really white neighborhood in Rochester and be like, we need to preserve this. You know,
Exactly.
this way of, like, we have a good thing going here. You know, because you could do that, but like, why would we?
We see so much of that. Just, I mean, and I don't know how much you guys could talk about candidates, but like, I just think of Joe Biden's last State of the Union where he said something like illegals murdering people. And that just
Yeah,
made me
did.
very, very
Yeah, he
depressed.
mentioned Lake and Riley. He did the whole
did?
thing.
It's
Yeah.
just as an example of like
Lake and Riley.
rhetorical drift that
Yeah.
that the left allows when it comes to these issues. Yeah.
Well, and I think to that goes back to politicians. Their goal is to get a job or get a new job. It used to be for them to get the power that comes with that job, they had to kiss butts of voters and then deliver for them to keep that job or get the new job they wanted. Now is not that. And I think you just see that drift happening since Citizens United or whatever you want to call it back to, but I think all of us would agree that drift has happened so much. And the way the Republicans have played it is to just lean into splitting people apart into smaller and smaller groups of who the enemy is and who the good guy is. And Democrats have tried to say that all the people are the good guys, except for, of course, the bad guys for that moment, for them to help them get their job. So then it's confusing. But with Michigan for the Many and Invest in My Kids, our thing is we want all of you to be a part of this. And when we've done polling for our ballot initiative, it had a 14% higher approval than the like standard deviation
Mm.
Nice.
amongst self-proclaimed Republicans. So it started
Oh.
off as like 38% or something, and then after the battery of questions ended 14% higher. So that's a
Yeah.
good sign. And that's the thing that Murryum was saying about the pitch is the pitch. We would say, here's what it is, 5% surcharge on people that make $1 million a year or more. Put that in the schools. Yes or no? And they go, yeah, of course. Why not?
Because I was gonna say also we want people to have like ownership of this as like the same thing,
Yeah.
right? You don't want it after it passes. It's like, well, I thought I voted for that. Oh, so, but everyone is like, we voted for the schools, and that way, if the legislature tries to do something or like divert funds another way, everybody remembers like we voted for this. I collected signatures for this in the heat wave. I remember I'm gonna maybe go
Yeah.
call my representative or be like, don't do this.
Yeah, being clear about it makes it harder to bastardize
Totally.
later on or trick people into not actually
Yeah.
supporting it. Yeah, I think that
And
makes a lot of
to
sense.
the right wing framing too, it's I think a lot of because me and Murryum have gone all across the state for the last since February.
Sometimes by Zoom. But
Yeah,
sure.
sometimes by
Yeah.
Zoom. But also
Hey, we'll count it.
there we go, yeah. But they've listened. It's crazy, you
Yeah.
know?
I bet.
So one, the funniest thing is if you go to like a restaurant or something and to be doing the pitch, and then you ask the waitress who's helping, you know, you're at the Dems Club of Chippewa County,
Mhm.
and there's like 20 old folks there, and the waitress comes in and you say, hey, what do you think? Raise taxes on millionaires to fund the schools? They go, absolutely. My kids got XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And then you just hear people telling their stories. And so what's funny is what I've at least found, I don't know if you feel the same way, Murryum, is this the like most unexpected group to have to court has been
Oh,
like the
the
upper
political
middle,
elite.
yeah, the like upper middle class,
Mm.
Why am I not
more
surprised?
more than likely Democrats
Yeah.
who
Sure, more than
are
likely.
very involved and they're more than happy to like do the signs
Sort of
at
the
the rally.
academics sometimes.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
consultant
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
My
Oh, we got
enemies.
beef with the
Yeah.
It's like
consultant
people
class.
who like, if you had to like yes or no really quickly, yes or no really quickly would be like, yeah, fund schools. But like if you give them more than a second to think about it,
They think their way
like-
out of it. Yeah.
not even out of it, but just like maybe we should slow things down and think
Yeah.
about it
How's
some
that
more.
gonna
Yeah.
work?
How is that going to affect this, and
Yeah.
that? I don't think it's like well-meaning, but
And this is
Mm.
why
we're just like, how many signatures are you going to collect?
this is
Yeah.
why the party as a whole is at its lowest approval rating ever. Like, I feel like this is why they're historically unpopular. This is why generic Democrats consistently poll higher than any named candidate. And I think just harkening back to a couple of the conversations we had earlier, maybe not me getting hopeful, but maybe there is something in your guys' favor that's like, it's harder to attack a policy or like an abstract idea as being
Ooh,
radical than it is
a
to attack
person.
a candidate as being
Mm.
radical. And I
Mm.
say this because I'm thinking back to, I think, the 2020 election or the 2022 election. Legalizing weed, I believe, in Florida polled higher or got a higher yes margin than Donald Trump or Joe Biden. A lot of these more
Wow.
radical
Same with the
ballot
wage,
initiatives.
the wage
The
initiative too.
$50
Yeah.
minimum
The wage
wage.
thing in Florida?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Aren't some of the people that worked on that
Oh
also
yeah,
with us?
Frank, one
Good
of the guys
omen.
that's helping us.
you're-
Cool.
He
yeah.
did that. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
good omen right there,
Yeah.
let me
Yeah.
tell you. And it's like I think people do crave these quote unquote radical policies. They just don't understand, or maybe they just don't have the political wherewithal to get behind the just millions of dollars in messaging that
It's the
Republicans
culture.
put out.
Yeah.
They can't overcome I don't want to say a broadly right-wing culture, but like
It's like
right-wing
being-
cultural
Yeah.
framing, being inundated with right-wing talking points.
It's like being like superstitious,
Mm.
I feel like. Right?
Yeah.
It's like don't, this is maybe just my family thing. Like don't go out with your hair wet.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a sort of like national psychosis
Like, I know, yeah.
that we've
Low-key.
allowed to develop, and it's been because of like both political parties. You don't even got to single any one person out here, but yeah, I think it's bad. But like Gage said, I do think it being a ballot proposal rather than like a person is a good sign or like a good component.
I think people like fundamentally want to be excited about things. Again, just going back to Zoran, it's such like a radical thing that happened. It's so radically
Mhm.
different. It's very hopeful. People want change. People want affirmative positions. People want to be able to get excited about something. And I think the Democrats nationally don't want anyone to be excited about anything except austerity and whatever they want that's going to help, like you said, the business class, the consultant class of people. And we get people like Donald Trump in office and horrible things like the one big beautiful bill because Donald Trump is the only person that's willing to go out there and offer something that could possibly change their lives. Whether or not it's actually for the better doesn't really matter at the ballot box because people perceive it to be better.
Yeah.
You know, you saying that, I went to Sunday. Today's Tuesday. Sunday, I went to collect some volunteer signatures, right, for the ballot initiative. At some park, there was some community meeting. And so the host of the community meeting was like, all right, stand on this park bench and give your pitch to like the 100 people here.
Nice.
And so then we give the pitch, right? Raise taxes by 5% on millionaires, put that in the schools. And then I did the Michigan for the Many thing of get money out of politics, because if you have a contract with the state, you shouldn't be able to donate to politicians that work for the state. And people were like, yeah, for sure. And then the first guy that I came up to talk about volunteer signups, I said, hey, what did you think? He said, oh, it's a terrible idea. I said, that's interesting. Tell me why. And he said, well, who do you think the Democrats are? They're people like me who are rich. And that was just an interesting framing because I'm a millennial. So I remember being 2008, Barack Obama was a Democrat.
Yeah.
I remember 2016, Bernie Sanders, caucused with the Democrats. So, and this guy was, 60s, 70s. And he's like,
he remembers that too.
Yeah, he remembers it too. So it's just this interesting, like, just to what you're saying about Democrats moving to the center, or having this kind of weird thing about right or left.
It's weird because I thought it was like working people union, so you think that's what the 60-year-old remembers.
Right.
Yeah. That
anything.
facade has fallen away, it seems.
He wasn't down. He was like, that's why I became a Democrat.
Bro said, I wish the parties never switched.
Exactly. He said, who do you think Democrats are? And I was like, well, that's so weird. Where do you think all that stuff comes from? What do you think about Trump's tax cut bill, good or bad? And he's like, obviously it's not good because we need Medicaid. I was like, well, where do you think the money comes for it from? I'm confused. And he's like, don't get smart with me. And I was like, okay.
And it's like, buddy, do you
This
really
is the
pull
smart
in
the academic class.
Do you really pull in like $1 million income per year? Because that's the other thing about this. It's people who pull in $1 million in income per year. It's not net worth. It's not people who are being taxed on the value in their property. It's not the money in their savings account. It's not their retirement funds, not even just retirement contributions.
It's only dollars after $1 million.
It's 3%.
You are pulling in more than $1 million every year. You can spend $1 million in a year and then just have that money next year.
Yeah.
It's like... Because sometimes we talk about, like, when we do presentations to Dems clubs and stuff, the sales tax as, like, for example, like, it disproportionately affects poor people because if you have, like, $5 for the week versus $5,000 for the week. And I always try to say, like, just because you have more money doesn't mean things get more expensive. The granola bar is still going to cost $3.
Yep.
So it's like...
less of your budget goes towards those basic necessities.
People act as if I have more money, so obviously...
You're paying more in things other than W-2 taxes.
Right.
Well, it's like if you got $1 million for a household, you're good.
Every year.
You're so
one
good.
calendar year.
In order to have my heated pool.
Yeah. How can I live my luxuries if the kids can go to school?
I think another way to say it too is like, I did the 14 times thing, right? If you're an average household in Michigan, your income is 14 times smaller than the people that will be impacted by these taxes. Murryum just told you the top, was it 3%? The top 3% of earners will have this tax. Another way to say it is out of 10 million people in Michigan, 52,000 would pay this tax. A fourth way to say it that you're just making me think of is if the first thing you do, if you like won $1 million in a year, would be to pay off debt, like student loans or medical bills or your car note or your house, this ain't for you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this tax ain't for you. To vote for this because you're going to reap all the benefits for your children and your children's children. And your house values because your community schools will be better. And for your small business or the business that your boss runs because it will make Michigan a place where people want to invest because we'll have smarter, better trained people to work for you.
And it's just like a new marginal tax rate. Like, it's just a new marginal tax rate for a specific thing. Like, nobody's leaving Michigan over an additional 5%. Like,
also, in terms of the statistics, I think the stat is, so out of all the states in the country that have an income tax, because I didn't realize some states like Montana and Texas do not have an income tax at the state level.
Yeah.
You guys know this?
I think Texas was a recent development, right? I think they got rid of their income tax like in the last 5 years.
Florida also doesn't have an income tax, right? Yeah. And they're the most progressive tax state in the country.
Yeah.
So out of the states that do have the income tax, majority of them have some type of system where it's not flat, the opposite of flat. I'm trying
Oh.
not to cause confusion and say other
Yeah.
words.
Yeah.
But like it's I don't know, like 37 or no, 27 out of like the 30 something or out of the 44 maybe. 27 out of 44, something like that. Majority of the states that have an income tax have a progressive
Yeah.
income tax.
Yeah.
Or at least
Which-
different levels.
Yeah.
It's just like,
So us adding this 5% surcharge, if you make over $1 million a year, what the hell?
it's putting us in line with
It's
everybody else.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's normal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
what's
Americans
normal.
are living with it and probably living better.
It's
because
not
of it.
only not normal to have a flat tax, it's just dumb. Like, it's
Yeah.
just stupid. Like you said before about like sales taxes being regressive, flat taxes are also regressive. The less money you have, the more of a burden you are. The more burdened you are by this tax. And that's what it is. I don't like that.
When we were driving back from the Board of Canvassers in our car full of people, we had a, it's 2-hour drive from Lansing and stuff. And so we had this cool talk with some of our volunteers who were high schoolers that came.
Nice.
And so one of the things is one of our volunteers said, we were talking about, what do you think about this? How you feel about that? And, after you do the kind of like headlines thing of like, oh, this guy's a jerk, or I wish these people did that, you dig down to like, what's your life like? And so one of our volunteers said she stocked or used to stock shelves at Kroger, right? She's 16 or something. And she used to work after school stocking shelves at Kroger. And then she said also, I feel less respect for people that don't work harder than I do at my job, right? People that I don't see as working hard are part of the problem. So another person stocking shelves at Kroger is the problem because they're not working as hard as me.
Yeah.
And I went, oh man, that's crazy.
That's crazy.
Because do you think the CEO of Kroger puts in 40 hours a week?
Uh-huh.
Do you think it's easy to put in 40 hours a week on your private jet and company car?
Yeah.
So then who's really the enemy here? And I just lift that up to say first, to what you're saying about the framing and how Michigan for the Many Invest in My Kids is going to have to stay focused is it's going to be so easy to have so many of us split off against each other. And it's going to be so hard for us all to stay focused on that culture shift we need of, no, the guy stocking the shelves at Kroger with you is also making minimum wage. And you know what else? While you're at work, you're not able to pay attention to the news. While you're at work, you're not able to call your rich friends to come to a fundraiser at brunch at your house on a Sunday, right? I used to work for politicians, right? I used to work for U.S. senators and do fundraising for them as like a finance intern or something, right? When I was trying to learn when I went from being a social worker to trying to get into politics, I worked for federally elected people that had to fly to D.C., right? U.S. senator, U.S. Congress people, I worked for them from Michigan. If you have not had the privilege of what I experienced once, which was I was in outside San Francisco, California, talking to the like 23rd employee at Google, trying to get him to give my candidate, who was sitting next to me having coffee at this guy's house in his backyard, the max out contribution of $5,400 at the time. And I said, so I was sitting there and he got a phone call. He put his finger up to us, a lady running for Congress, asking for $5,400, and me just trying to take notes, look like I'm important with her. And he goes, hey, Steve, I can talk. What's up? No problem. And he did this, and then he talked to this dude, walked around his backyard for like 15 minutes with apparently the Democrat governor of Montana at the time, Steve Bullock, who was also asking for a crap ton of money. So if you are a person, another way to think about this tax, just having done fundraising, having done the call sheets, having been a call time manager for people running for U.S. Senate and Congress, having sat in those rooms, just as like the guy taking the coat for the rich people, right? I'm not important, but I'll take your coat and say welcome and sit down, and the senator's over there. But like if you haven't had 5 minutes of one-on-one time uninterrupted with the governor of Michigan, with your United States congressperson, with your United States senator, you are not getting a fair shake. And we are trying to give you a better chance of having more power. That comes from less money to those that have too much to begin with, and more money for our kids, and less power and influence for people that are able to influence our elections in Michigan, and more power and influence to you, a person that has to be at work stocking shelves at Kroger, instead of having one-on-ones with the governor.
Yeah, and I think this feeling that the political system just doesn't work for most people is pretty ubiquitous, as you've been saying. But look, we really appreciate both of you taking the time to come on. If there are people listening that want to help out, where can they go?
Oh, they can go to investinmikids.org, or to be honest, you can just text me at my phone number.
You're gonna give your phone number here on the
boom,
show?
There you go. Just text it 947-500-1144.
Now it's like an ad.
That's right. Yeah.
Have it come up on the bottom.
That's right. Yeah. Call now for a better future for your
Tax
children.
Gospel.
That's right. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. For a
Excellent.
better future for your kids, call now.
There you go.
We
Limited
will have
time
that link
offer.
in the description and Charlie's phone number in
Yeah.
the description. For
We
you.
already have 2,000 of our 5,000 volunteers we need, so act fast.
Actually,
Is
oh,
this
of
like
course.
is this your
Okay.
personal phone number?
Yeah, so text, don't call.
Okay,
Yeah.
text, don't call. It won't get a call answered. So if you're listening, make
Great.
sure you
Now
text
I'm gonna
that
try
phone
to call
number.
and it's gonna be like message box full. Great.
Anyways, any closing thoughts before we sign off?
It's really cool what you guys are doing. Yeah, sorry. Man.
Oh no, I said I don't know. I said I don't
I
know.
think it's really cool what you guys are doing.
We
it's
appreciate
really
it.
nice.
Thank you.
Because, they've been saying, I don't know if this goes into the show or not, but like, they've been saying that all politics is local, but then it's in the last, since social media or whatever, they're saying now that all politics is national.
Yeah.
And I think you guys are like tying that thread of how, yes, it is national, but you're tying it to the local and you're making it relevant for people.
Doing our best.
And that's
man.
cool.
That's
Yeah.
that's what we try to do. I feel like my general philosophy when it comes to it, obviously we cover mostly national things,
Sure.
but that's because, like you said, social media makes politics national. It's what Trump does that gets people's attention. So I think personally it's important to take what Trump does, extract, I guess, the theory behind it, tell people what's going on, and then make them care about what's happening locally from that. It's to take that
We're
care
trying so hard
and
to
funnel
do
them
that
down.
in our own stuff.
Yeah,
It's
it's hard. I mean, it's like the
tough.
challenge of the time, right?
Yeah.
Given social media and whatnot. But yeah, we'll take every opportunity we can to get people to come on to talk about stuff that we think actually matters.
Yeah.
So we greatly appreciate it, and we'll see everyone next time.